boys and gals. This is Nicholas Cross, immersed in the middle of a beautiful B.G. Meyer cigar, a nice cold glass of chilled Mountain Dew, and a classic between Gorilla Monsoon and Captain Lou Albano. And I know what you're thinking, why in the world is this guy watching a classic between Captain Lou and Gorilla Monsoon? I'm going to tell you. The reason is simple. I'm a wrestling fan. I'm actually a wrestling fanatic. I am a nut for the business of professional wrestling. I like all things wrestling. I even like to go way back and watch some Gorgeous George stuff, some Haystacks Calhoun stuff. I like to get myself immersed in what Nick Gullis created way back in the day. And that's because I'm a purist. I love what wrestling is, was, and forever will be. One of the things that I love most about wrestling, however, is the mystery, the intrigue, the question of, did that really just happen? Was that supposed to happen? Was that scripted? The idea that this week is going to bring me an answer to last week's question, and last week's question has been beating me to death the whole week to find out what's really going on. If you guys remember during the Attitude Era, no one told that story probably better than the angles that came with NWO. I mean, it seemed like every single Monday Night Nitro, we were waiting for some kind of main event caliber match, whether it featured Goldberg or Sting or Hogan or Nash or Hall or who. And the question was always, what in the world is going to happen next week? And they would always leave you hanging by a thread trying to figure it out. Way back in the 80s, there was no difference, actually. It was always the mystery and intrigue, while the storytelling wasn't the same in terms of guys talking on the microphone and backstage interviews. The storytelling was done in the ring, and you were left hanging. In the beginning, way back in that day, in the beginning of a match, if a guy was poked in the eye, he would sell that eye for the rest of the match, and it left the question of, is that eye gouge going to be the reason why this guy lost the match? If there was any cheating antics whatsoever, it was for a purpose. And generally, in the business, that purpose was in order to set a standard for the entire match. Go back and look at all the Flair classics of the 80s. Talking about Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, talking about even the Luger, the Sting matches, which weren't Paramount matches by any stretch of the imagination, but were unbelievable matches, or the Flair Dusty Rhodes saga. You can see that what Ric Flair did as a great heel in the beginning of those matches set a standard for the end of the match. It always came back somehow. And sometimes the thing that Ric Flair did in that match may have progressed further on down the road. Dusty Rhodes may have been hurt for weeks or even months. And what we see today is a complete lack of that idea in general. What we see today is a completely predictable product. Now, don't get me wrong. The talent pool is far better than it ever has been. On Wednesday night, we got to watch TNA Impact Wrestling, and the talent pool there is beyond our wildest speculation of what we could ever expect out of talent. I mean, you got Bobby Lashley bearing the torch for the company. While you got him bearing the torch, you've got Samoa Joe. You've got Bobby Roode. You've got a talent roster that's unbelievable. Ethan Carter III. The list goes on and on and on. This X Division, unbelievable. Talent everywhere. But what is talent if talent isn't being displayed properly? Look at WWE. You have talent that is galore. In a few minutes, we're going to be immersing ourselves in SmackDown on this Friday, September 5th, and we're going to be enjoying every single moment of it. But even in the middle of all that SmackDown is, I'm curious, what is the talent doing if the talent isn't acting like professional wrestlers? One thing that I want to point out is if there's a poke in the eye today, it makes no difference for the rest of the match. If someone does a closed fist jab right to the chin in the beginning of a match, it has no bearing on the future of the match. Whereas if you remember the late Dick Murdoch, if somebody jabbed him in the chin, real or not real, in the beginning of the match, that dude was still feeling the effects of that thing at the end of the match. Well, this is where wrestling has taken a bad turn. And I think in an entertainment-driven society, we look for something a little bit more expected. We don't really want the mystery, but in reality, we really do want the mystery. I mean, look at the most successful movies that have come out. It's because they've left mystery. They've left you hanging, especially in trilogies and sagas. Also, look into the genre of just plain Jane television. Look at some of the great TV shows of the age. The reason that they had standing and longevity, unless they're The Simpsons, which I'm not sure what happened there. Such a successful show with no story at all. But unless they're that case, the story always leaves you wanting more. You want to know what's really going on. Did that person really die? One of my favorite shows is Sons of Anarchy. Another great one that came and I'm waiting for it to come again was Orange is the New Black. And I always had the question of what is going to happen next. Well, there would be nothing in the world that I would love to see more than to turn on TV Monday night, Wednesday night, and Friday night and enjoy something that is akin to what I know best, something that is akin to leaving me hanging. And something else that I would love more is to learn how to put my phone on silent during a broadcast. Well, that notwithstanding, one thing that interests me more than anything about professional wrestling, and has forever, is the mystery. And that's what wrestling was always based on. In the 80s, the 70s, even before that, it was a mystery of everyone asking the question, well, is this real or is this not real? As the genre moved on, it was not so much a question of if it's real, it was a question of what's about to happen next. Where in the world are we going to go from here? What is Stone Cold Steve Austin going to do to Vince McMahon next week? Or how is Vince McMahon going to retaliate from Stone Cold Steve Austin's actions this week? Or what is Hogan going to do while Sting's hot on his heels? Is Goldberg going to finally lose? Do you guys remember asking those questions? For you younger fans who are just now getting into the genre, let me tell you something. I believe that the genre listens to us as fans, and I believe that unfortunately we are not very vocal when it comes to die-hard wrestling fans. We exhibit our displeasure from time to time about the genre, but do we do it in such a way that the genre hears what we have to say? What I mean by this is simple. For those of us who are avid professional wrestling fans, perhaps it's time for us to liven the genre or bring the genre up to speed on what we want. What we want is to hang by the edge of our seats until next week or until the next event. You know, look at wrestling right now. We got a lot of good stuff going on. In fact, a lot of you guys out there that listen to me and that have been listening to me over the years, you complain about Brock Lesnar. And that's fine. If you don't like Brock Lesnar, you don't like Brock Lesnar. This is a free world. We were given that right by God himself or whoever you pray to. And the bottom line is, Brock Lesnar's good, though. And Brock Lesnar is great for business. And you know what makes Brock Lesnar so good is because he brought suspicion back to wrestling. Because now we're asking the question of who can beat Brock Lesnar. It's not conceivable that John Cena is going to win at Night of Champions. It's not conceivable that anyone's going to be able to dethrone him the rest of this year. And although we're looking at Roman Reigns and the possibilities of Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 31 for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, there is no conceivable way that at this moment that anybody close, including Roman Reigns, could defeat Brock Lesnar. He is the beast incarnate, and he brings to wrestling what we desperately need in wrestling: the idea of suspicion, the idea of suspense, the idea of a mystery. And when you have to think about something, when it's not predictable, then it's good. A lot of people are saying, well, John Cena's not going to beat Brock Lesnar at Night of Champions. That's good. And it would be actually even better if somehow John Cena did pull it out, because then we're shocked. But then something else shocking happens. And then another shocking thing happens. And then another shocking thing happens. And the next thing you know, we're in the middle of ourselves, our daily lives, our routines being wrapped up into the idea of what's going to happen next. I remember as a professional wrestler in the 90s, and I remember one thing that was great for me was to watch my fans, albeit not a vast majority by any standards, but to watch my fans weekly, whether I was in Chicago or Davenport or Des Moines or Charlotte or Asheville or Toccoa or Atlanta or anywhere for that matter, to watch my fans have the question in their mind of what is the next thing that's going to take place. Well, they never knew because a promoter wouldn't give it away. And in today's market, I think that we shouldn't know. I don't think that there should be all these spoilers. Spoilers are what ruin the wrestling business. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I already know what happened on SmackDown, although we're going to be tuning in a few minutes. I read the report already. And I think it's ridiculous that I read the report. I know that people want to give information away, and everybody wants to be the first guy to get the name on the market to say, look at what I found out. I was at the SmackDown show on Tuesday, and now I'm going to tell everybody what happens on Wednesday. Well, what you're doing is you're ruining it for people. People need to have the mystery. And I'm going to tell you guys how we can overcome the issues that are surrounding professional wrestling. It's not so much the show as it is the people who are giving away the information. So what we should do is quit giving these sites any of our attention whatsoever. Quit reading this junk. Quit going on there and saying, well, TNA was taped last week, so we may as well go find out what happens this week so we don't have to watch. Let me ask you, why wouldn't you want to watch? I mean, if you got an opportunity to watch the wrestling show or go out to eat with a family, I would go out to eat with a family. But if you're at home, you're bored, you have nothing to do, you are a wrestling fan, turn it on. Watch it. Enjoy it. Get immersed in the thing. Quit reading about it. Quit trying to find out beforehand what's going on. Quit immersing yourself in someone else's drama. Quit reading all of this crap that exists out there that tries to give everything away. You know, it's cool to have the mystery given away, but it's also cool to find the mystery on our own. Hey guys, check this out. When I come back here in just a minute, we're going to talk about tonight's SmackDown show, and we're going to look forward a little bit to Night of Champions, because it's not just about Lesnar and Cena, it's about so much more. Stay tuned, hold on after the break. This is Nicholas Cross, Rockin' Wrestling Radio, YouTube exclusive. Be right back in just a minute. Guys and gals, I thank you for holding on with me for the break. I needed to take a few more puffs off of my BG Meyer and get a little bit more of my Diet Mountain Dew rocking down the gullet. Well, as promised, we're going to be talking about SmackDown and looking forward also to Night of Champions. Now, before we get into all this, I am curious how you guys feel about Night of Champions. So this is where the interaction takes place. This is what I love about using the venue, if you will, of YouTube as our new home, as our place of residence. I love the fact that you can comment below, and I also promise you the fact that we will continue to comment with you. We want to know what you have to say. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to get into the conversation with you, and we want to know what's going on in your mind about professional wrestling. Well, as it stands for me, tonight, Friday, September 5th, 2014, we are looking ahead at SmackDown. And of course, SmackDown is going to be a pretty good show. At least I feel it is. The card is going to feature some pretty cool matches. I know that we're going to see Dolph Ziggler with Cesaro, and I understand that Sheamus will be ringside on commentary. I also know that we're going to see Lana and Rusev. I know that we're going to see Paige versus Brie Bella. Wow. Bo Dallas is going to take on Zack Ryder. I'm not sure what Zack Ryder is, but he's going to be wrestling. Of course, we know who Zack Ryder is, but he's one of those guys that are ultimately hidden away from the entire picture of wrestling, so I can almost imagine what's going to happen there. But probably the bigger story is going to be the fact that the main event is this huge Survivor Series-esque type match. It's going to be John Cena, Roman Reigns, Jericho, Big Show, and Mark Henry squaring off one-on-one against Rollins, Kane, and the Wyatt family in a 10-man tag team match. Now, we already know what happened, but because we want to eliminate mystery, and we want to have mystery, rather, and we want to eliminate all this spoiler mess, we're going to let go of it. But what I do want to talk about is that being the big match, that being the big moment, that being where all the stars are aligned. You have everybody who's anybody. You have Cena and Reigns. You have, of course, Jericho in the match. You have Rollins and Kane and Bray Wyatt, notwithstanding the Big Show, Mark Henry, or Luke Harper or Eric Rowan. You got the big dogs in WWE as it stands, squaring off in this 10-man tag team match in the main event. Now, to me, this puts all the cards in a row. The only person that's missing is, of course, Randy Orton, but we know that there's issues there. And so the question remains, where are we going? One thing that's curious to me is John Cena. In this match, he has the, I don't know how you say it, it's not the polarizing perception, it's the question of who is he anymore? At the beginning of the show, I think that John Cena is going to cut a promo, and in that promo, there's going to be the question of why is everyone confused about what happened with Brock Lesnar? And I think that the promo is going to open us up to the idea that John Cena may be heading in a new direction in his career. As we talked about on Tuesday, we talked about and we looked at the idea of Hulk Hogan. You remember in the 90s, Hogan lost his flair. He lost what he had held for that illustrious 80s run. He was losing everything. His steam, it was over. The yellow and red, the Hulkamaniacs, the saying the prayer, the vitamins, and all this wonderful stuff. It was going by the wayside. People wanted more edge. They wanted something different. Well, in 2000-something or another, 2001, 2, in that area, we got John Cena. And John Cena has been the mainstay. He's been there for the past decade, and he's practically been running amok in WWE. Well, we're at a place now where WWE gets to call him polarizing, because you get to have your own opinion about John Cena. You get to say what you want and feel how you want about John Cena, and that's all fine, well, and good, but that's not the way that wrestling was made. It's not up to the fans, really. It's not up to us to decide who we want to like and who we want to hate. It's actually up to the booker. And what we need to do is we either need to love John Cena or we need to hate John Cena. The idea of a tweener is not a good idea at all. And I think that it's time for John Cena to step out of the polarizing picture and step into the picture that Hulk Hogan had to finally realize in the 1990s. And let me tell you something. Hogan, when he came about to this Hollywood Hogan character, he was amazing. It was a new page in the chapter of Hulkamania, but it was also a new page in the chapter of professional wrestling. The guy who had led wrestling through the 80s also was part of an era that put wrestling back on the map in the 90s and into the new millennium. Well, John Cena, I'm sorry to say this, as many of us love to hate him or hate to love him, John Cena is a guy that has that ability. You think about the kids, you think about the young people, you think about the fans. All he has to do is come out and call him a piece of crap, and John Cena has just cemented a new legacy for himself. And now we're no longer mad about him holding WWE championships. We're no longer mad about him continuing this reign of terror, if you will, on our TV sets, because now we want to see him get the crap kicked out of him. And that's what John Cena is going to have to do. Of course, it's not just Cena in this match. It's also Roman Reigns. Now, this guy is special. A lot of people believe he has the it factor that we always talk about. I'm not too sure if he does have the it factor or not. It's too soon. But I can tell you this, he can't be a juggernaut his whole career. Goldberg became a joke to wrestlers and to fans alike because they booked him as a juggernaut, the undefeatable monster. Roman Reigns has that perception already, and unfortunately, it's not really going to carry over. The only way that I can see that them working this out is if they're trying to justify an eventual defeat for let me get my head on straight. Eventually, Roman Reigns beating Brock Lesnar. And personally, I don't feel as though that needs to happen. Chris Jericho, well, this guy is amazing. He needs a last run as a heel champion, I think, but he's on his way out, unfortunately. On the other side, two of my favorite wrestlers, period, featured in this main event match. Seth Rollins, and this guy is amazing. You say what you want, Seth Rollins is ready. Seth Rollins is ripe for the picking right now, and it's time for us to take this chance to look at Seth Rollins. The theme has been mystery here. Well, it's a mystery to me what's happening with this Money in the Bank briefcase. It doesn't appear that because Seth Rollins is a heel that he's going to go after Brock Lesnar as a heel. That makes little to no sense whatsoever. But wouldn't it be cool if Seth Rollins as a heel went after Brock Lesnar as a heel? Wouldn't it be cool if something were to open up and the mystery would be revealed? Wouldn't it be neat if we saw something really, really cool with Seth Rollins? He's deserving, he's hungry, he's the future. Another guy that's the future is Bray Wyatt. We were talking about characters on Tuesday. We were looking at Bray Wyatt, and I compared him to The Undertaker. I'm not the only guy who has ever compared Bray Wyatt to The Undertaker. If you guys ever listened to the Ross Report at Podcast 1, you know that Jim Ross himself continues to compare, not necessarily the athletic ability or all this, but compare Bray Wyatt to The Undertaker. It's been said before, and I'm saying it now. Another thing that Jim Ross says that I want to echo here and agree 100% is that Bray Wyatt should be the company's face. He should be the baby. You remember the 90s ushered in The Undertaker. And at first, he wasn't the hottest ticket on town. I mean, he didn't have the biggest moveset. He was different. He was unorthodox. It seemed as though he was this paradoxical character that no one could really figure out. He was dead or was he alive? Was Paul Bearer really a mortician? Turned out he was. Nevertheless, he had the ability and the factor that left us questioning what he was really about. Well, that's why we all loved him. Bray Wyatt is no different. We are all trying to figure out who the heck this guy is, what's he got going on, and what in the world is going to happen with his character in the future. It's my opinion that Bray Wyatt should be given the ball to run with because Bray Wyatt has the ability. He comes from a great wrestling family. His father, Mike Rotundo, his brother, Bo Dallas, is there. And everything in the cards, it all looks good for them. And I'm really, really happy to know that two of these guys, Bo Dallas and Bray Wyatt, are in WWE and are going to prosper and are going to make it. Both of them, without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, as long as Bo Dallas is used correctly, are going to be future WWE World Heavyweight Champions. With that said, the match sets us up, the 10-man tag team, sets us up for what we're looking for at Night of Champions. Now, first and foremost, I know that there's several matches that are booked on the card already. One of those matches is this kind of awkward three-way dance between Paige, AJ Lee, and Nikki Bella. I'm curious to see how this story continues to unfold. I believe that somehow they're going to give Nikki Bella the title out of this, and I think it's going to be through some shocks and some twists. But I do find it interesting that the Bella twins, Stephanie McMahon, that they're locked in one of the best stories that WWE has seen in quite some time, because there is some suspense there, and we're wondering what exactly is going to happen. Well, Nikki Bella's been added to the mix with Paige and AJ Lee, and we're curious to see where this is going to end up. And I think it's ultimately going to lead to a title match between Nikki and Brie Bella, and I'm really excited about that. Here's something else I'm excited about, and that's Dolph Ziggler and The Miz again. The Miz, to me, is your classic wrestling heel. If you remember back in the 80s, heels were chicken. They ran. They were scared to death until they had the ability to get the upper hand. Miz, he's right on target. This is exactly what wrestling is supposed to be. He has a gimmicky, real character. The movie star thing, the don't hit me in the face theme, it all fits in with what wrestling is supposed to be, and everybody hates his guts, and that's perfect. He's better than everybody, or at least that's the character, is better than everybody. He is above and beyond. He has the personification that my crap don't stink, and that's why we hate the guy's guts. On the other end is Dolph Ziggler. Once again, a perfect emulation of what a babyface should be. And what I love about Dolph Ziggler is in recent months, over the past year even, he hasn't been put in the best spot by WWE. Nobody knows the real reason why except Dolph Ziggler and WWE officials. And maybe Dolph Ziggler don't even know. But the bottom line is this. This guy has the ability to bring the Intercontinental Championship back to the place that it should be. Do you remember in the 90s, the Intercontinental title was a title that was worthy of being battled for? I'm not talking about just preliminary matches or little fun matches or little gimmick matches or little this, little that, and little the third. I'm talking about Razor Ramon, Scott Hall. I'm talking about Shawn Michaels. I'm talking about Big Daddy Cool Diesel. I'm talking about Bret the Hitman Hart, the British Bulldog. I'm talking about a gamut of wrestlers that had the ability to really bring it. And I'm talking about many pay-per-view events that the show was absolutely whipped out from underneath everyone else by that very belt, the Intercontinental Championship. And I feel in my mind that Dolph Ziggler, a guy that reminds me of Billy Gunn, a guy that reminds me of Shawn Michaels, a guy that reminds me of Macho Man Randy Savage, if you put your mind on it, has that ability to carry the Intercontinental title to all new heights. Well, there's another mid-card championship in the WWE that I think shouldn't be, and this one's the United States Championship. The United States Championship does not have the great heritage of the Intercontinental Championship, at least to me. In the 80s, you had some good guys that carried it, and some of those guys, including some of the Horsemen, some of the Koloffs, Volkovs, Rushevs, or whatever their names were, the Russian coalition, some of those guys were good wrestlers, but it wasn't really the same prestige that the Intercontinental Championship held. Well, the match, however, at Night of Champions will be Sheamus versus Cesaro. Sheamus, of course, will be defending this title, and on most cases, we believe that Cesaro will be winning the United States Championship. In my opinion, and of course my opinion is humbled by the reality that really no one listens, you should see a Cesaro victory for the United States Championship, and you should see a Ziggler victory to maintain the Intercontinental Championship. And in my opinion, these two individuals should immerse themselves in a feud. We should see the collaboration, the combining, the unification of the Intercontinental and United States Championships, just like we did the WWE and the World Championship. And the reason is for this. Those belts seem to get lost because there's so many of them. If you remember WCW and WWE in the Attitude Era, they had so many titles floating around out there. It wasn't even European Hardcore, World, Intercontinental Tag Team. Who knows what else there was? WCW was no different. TV, United States, Hardcore, World Tag, all this stuff, and there were so many champions. Well, if you limit the number of champions and you make those champions who are champions, if you make them more important and you display their title as if it has prestige, then you make the show more interesting. Well, the Intercontinental Championship and the United States Championship being unified, I can't even talk, would be a very important thing because it would show the importance. And if the match between Dolph Ziggler and Cesaro at whatever event it finally takes place is for the unification, and it were a ladder match just like Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels did when they put the two Intercontinental titles together, it would be a show stealer and it would bring value back to whichever title they decided to call it. Speaking of titles that are valuable, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but the WWE Championship has lost a tremendous amount of value over the past several years. The reason has been, for one, because of injuries, for two, because of people being tired of seeing the go-to guys carry the titles, and for three, because there hasn't really been that big match feel. I can remember at one point in time watching the WWE Championship go at WrestleMania main events with some of the biggest names and some of the brightest stars, and in some of the greatest matches that you could ever imagine. I'm talking about Lesnar and Angle. I'm talking about The Rock, Austin. I'm talking about all of the big names that really brought the title where it needs to be. Well, it is this guy's opinion that Brock Lesnar has brought the WWE World Heavyweight Championship back to its paramount level, and that at Night of Champions, John Cena maybe should put up a little bit more of a fight, but the guy should be brutalized all over again. I think that Brock Lesnar is the future of the old way of wrestling, a dominant, overpowering, unbelievable champion. It is also this guy's opinion that they should turn Brock Lesnar babyface. And the reason that I feel this way is because Brock Lesnar is a cemented character. Everyone knows who Brock Lesnar is, whether you're a UFC fan or a WWE fan. It's not his first rodeo holding titles. He was the UFC champion. He was a former WWE champion. It's time for Paul Heyman to move on to bigger and better horizons. And what is a better way to do that than to put him with a young guy who has a future in professional wrestling? Now, if Brock Lesnar was more full-time, he has several years left in him. But there are so many guys who have decades left in them who have the ability to really bring something new to the table. And Paul Heyman has the ability to bring even more to the table than just them by themselves. Well, check this out, guys. I think that Night of Champions is adding up to be a really nice event. And I feel as though that everything is in place for another wonderful match between John Cena and Brock Lesnar. That being said, I don't know if it's going to be so wonderful as it is going to be a bloodbath. And speaking of bloodbaths, maybe it's time for us to see a little bit more blood in wrestling. Hey, just hang on just a minute now. I'll be right back with the closing segment of Rockin' Wrestling Radio exclusively here on YouTube. Well, you can't possibly imagine how much fun I've had today on this Friday edition of Rockin' Wrestling Radio exclusively on YouTube. But I'm going to tell you, it has been an exciting time, and we have talked about some pretty cool stuff, at least cool in my mind. Cool in my mind in that I really like talking about it. In fact, every single day I love getting together with you guys and talking about things that have been cool over the history of wrestling on this particular date. And other than the Friday Night SmackDown that is currently taking place, September 5th has played a major role in the wrestling industry, as there has been a lot of stuff that has happened. And when it comes to those lots of things, a lot of stuff continues to happen. Well, before we get into anything concerning Friday, September 5th, as it relates to the history of wrestling, as always, we would like to celebrate and mourn over the death and life of one Scott K. Irwin. He passed away on September 5th of 1987. He was born May 13th, 1952, and he died of a brain aneurysm. We know him from AWA, WCW, and a long, long time ago from the WWF. And, of course, young Scott Irwin, also known as Yukon Eric, had his matches with some of the greats, including Haystacks Calhoun, Larry Zbyszko, Dino Bravo, Dominic DeNucci, Gorilla Monsoon. He had times against Chief J. Strongbow, Peter Maivia, and the list continues. And, of course, there are some sincerely big names that are involved with one Scott Irwin or Yukon Eric. One of the names is Kurt Hennig. How about Scott Hall? How about Andre the Giant? How about Gino Hernandez? Or let's talk about Bill Irwin, involved with Junkyard Dog, Iceman King Parsons. Young man today that we celebrate all of these great matches. Not at all a preliminary wrestler. Plenty of titles, plenty of wins, plenty of fun. But we also mourn over the passing of one Scott Irwin or Yukon Eric. You will be missed, and we will remember you and celebrate you on every September 5th as we continue along as we do every single day. Well, we celebrated or mourned the passing of Yukon Eric, but there are a lot of people who we could celebrate on September 5th. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of people that we would like to say happy birthday to. And among those people are some names that we know and some names that we don't know. One of the names that we don't know too well is Sakushi from Kamasu Ibarakakakaka. I'm not even sure how to pronounce that stuff. But this young lady was born on September 5th of 1997. How young can you be? And, of course, she was featured at Smash Show number 15 and has wrestled around Japan and other places on a number of events. And so we would like to celebrate her birthday and say happy birthday to you, Sakushi. Now, we'd also like to say happy birthday to Dre Blitz of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The young man was born September 5th, 1984. Do you know where we know this young man from? Well, we know him from OVW. Not a lot of wins under his belt, but he's wrestled some of the names that have come through OVW, and it's good to know that we're going to be celebrating your birthday, Mr. Dre Blitz. Excuse me. Of course, his real name is Jerome Bliss. So happy birthday to you, young man. Let me see if I can get my quethers together and talk without stuttering. How about Shane Sewell? Happy birthday to you, of Toronto, Canada. Born September 5th, 1976. And, of course, he's had his share of matches in TNA and New Japan Pro Wrestling, wrestling some people that we do know, such as Jushin Thunder Liger. How about Blue Wolf? Having matches involved with Samoa Joe, Booker T. The list goes on, including China or Johnny Lahr, as well as Brutus Magnus, Matt Morgan, the Sheik Abdul Bashir, and have I mentioned Samoa Joe? I mean, I got to be honest with you. I'm going to go ahead and say happy birthday to you, Shane Sewell. But the thing about this is, you wrestle Samoa Joe, you're on my bucket list. I mean, I know I'll never wrestle again, but Samoa Joe, for the love of Pete, give me a break. Happy birthday, Mr. Shane Sewell. Well, there's another guy that we do know. It's a name that was all too familiar and synonymous with professional wrestling. And the moment I say it, you're going to say, what in the world? That's the name of Ray Stevens, born September 5th, 1935. And where do we know him from? Everywhere. WWF, AWA, WWF, and the list goes on and on and on. Ray Stevens had his time teaming as well as feuding with Baron Von Raschke, with Jimmy Snuka, with Greg Gagne, with Tony Garea, with Chief Jay Strongbow, Jules Strongbow, Ivan Putski, Larry the Axe Hennig, The Crusher, Billy Graham, Nick Bockwinkel, Pedro Morales, and the list goes on and on and on. So we will say happy birthday to you, Mr. Ray Stevens. Of course, we know that Ray Stevens passed away, and we will miss you, but we thank you for the great lineage of professional wrestling that you left us. And then that brings us to the final birthday, and I want to ask you guys a question. Are you familiar with this name? How about Ox Anderson? You guys familiar with him? No, not really. Well, that's because he wasn't around too long, but he did have one unique match, and that was with Bruno Sammartino on September 21st of 1963. It was in Baltimore, Maryland, and it was a showcase of the Immortals. Well, maybe not just a showcase of the Immortals, but a showcase of Bruno Sammartino, certainly. So September 5th, 1931, happy birthday to you, Ox Anderson, and happy birthday to the rest of the guys and gals on the independent circuit and out there that I do not know, and to all of those out there who may be listening who have a birthday on September 5th, happy birthday to you as well. Well, you know, throughout history and throughout the annals of professional wrestling, September 5th has not just been a time that we mourn death or celebrate births, but it's also a time where there have been some pretty outstanding shows. Well, you guys remember on Tuesday, September 3rd, we talked about Labor Day Star Wars from WCCW. Well, there was also a Labor Day Star Wars on September 5th, 1983 from WCCW. 12,000 people piled into the Fort Worth Convention Center to witness a six-man tag that almost echoed the match from years prior. The match featured Buddy Roberts, Michael Hayes, and Terry Gordy, otherwise the Fabulous Freebirds, versus the Von Erich clan, the entire clan, David Von Erich, Kerry Von Erich, and Kevin Von Erich. But you know what was so unique about these shows back then? If you look at the three matches prior to the main event, it featured Kerry Von Erich versus Michael Hayes, Kevin Von Erich versus Jim Jam Garvin, and David Von Erich versus Terry Gordy. Of course, those three matches were all won by the Von Erichs, but then the main event was lost by the Von Erichs. It's either a sign of slightly misconstrued card, or Texas really liked their Von Erichs. I'm leaning towards the last. Of course, there were other matches involved in that. Bruiser Brody took on Kamala, and Buddy Roberts took on King Parsons, and 12,000 people, I would venture to say, got their money's worth. There were other things that happened. How about Clash of Champions, 1991, Fall Brawl War Games, WCW. Hey, let me ask you guys a question. You guys remember the War Games pay-per-view, right? It's all this big thing where everybody got together and there was this humongous battle royal. Well, there was one man in the 15-man battle royal in 1991 that reigned supreme. Do you guys know his name? El Gigante. You guys remember this guy? Wasn't he 8 foot tall or something like that? He was huge. Of course, he went on to become a WWF wrestler, and he was called Giant Gonzalez. And one of my favorite matches of all time, even though it really wasn't scientific, was at WrestleMania 9, the world's greatest toga party, when Undertaker took on Giant Gonzalez and got the V via disqualification. But Giant Gonzalez, or El Gigante, wasn't the only one featured in the event. Brian Pillman was there. Sting was there. Ricky Morton was there. Jim Garvin and Michael Hayes, the Freebirds, were there. The Diamond Stud was there. Van Hammer was there. Steve Austin was there. How about some Ron Simmons action? But you remember there's one match in there that really sticks out in my mind. It was Arn Anderson and Larry Zbyszko tagging against Bill Kazmaier and Rick Steiner. You guys want to talk about great matches? Go back and check out this tag team match. Full of entertainment, full of excitement, full of hype, and just about to blow my mind out. Well, the year before, on September 5th, NWA featured Clash of Champions, Fall Brawl, and this one was called Mountain Madness. Now, this one was a little bit more special because the matches were a little bit bigger. As a matter of fact, you don't believe me? How about the Armstrong Brothers versus the Fabulous Freebirds? Now, at the time, that was as good as it got. How about Mike Rotundo? We know him as IRS or whatever you may know him as, but his sons are having quite the career in WWE right now, and Bray Wyatt and one... whatever the kid's name is. Well, in 1990, he squared off against Buddy Landel in what was really a good match. Then you go down and we can see Iron and Steel took on Brad Armstrong and Tim Horner. The Nasty Boys taking on Jackie Fulton and Terry Taylor. How about Tommy Rich and Bill Irwin? Good match there. Susan Sexton and Bambi. It was for the LPWA World Title. It was pretty cool. How about the Steiner Brothers versus Jeff Warner and Tim Hunt? Stan Hansen. Now, this is somebody that was unique. Big career over in Japan, going off against Tom Zink. Well, it's the next two matches that really jump out to me. One was Lex Luger versus Ric Flair. And, of course, Lex Luger beat him, but it was via disqualification. A lot of people weren't happy about that. And then Sting maintaining his world championship against the Black Scorpion. You know, back in the 90s, if I may say, wrestling really had something, didn't it? I mean, we're talking about some big cards with some huge talent. And that talent was absolutely unbelievable. And that talent just continued to spill over into the 90s and where talent would change. Like on September 5th, 1998, ECW followed up on a show where we got to see some pretty crazy action. The main event was Rob Van Dam and Sabu versus the Dudley Boys, and it was for the ECW Tag Team titles, and it was unbelievable. But as time would progress, ECW would not just be the only organization that was putting out great packages on September 5th. WCW Thunder on September 5th of 2000 produced one heck of a show when Goldberg defeated both Helix Skipper and Lance Storm. But we know that there were other things involved. Something that just got hidden to me was Shane Douglas and Crowbar. Of course, I've always been a big Shane Douglas fan. But time would continue, and time continues even now. You think about it. September 5th of 2013, NXT had a Tampa show, and it was just another great show as Adrian Neville, God, is that guy amazing, and Corey Graves, another amazing talent, took on Conor O'Brien and Rick Victor in the Ascension. And I got to be honest with you, as we watch the progression, and if you look back to September 5th in history, you can see a great change in professional wrestling, all the way from 1983, where it was Labor Day Star Wars from WCCW, all the way to the current in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Today, Road to Destruction. Some great talent involved, including, and you wouldn't believe it, still, Jushin Thunder Liger still going. But how about Alex Shelley and Bad Luck Fale? A lot of good names that are still involved, still bringing on the wrestling industry. And this September 5th, we're also celebrating them. Well, guys and gals, it looks like September 5th is coming to an end here at Rockin' Wrestling Radio. And we are looking forward to Saturday, September 6th. And on Saturday, what comes other than our hour-long spectacular where we talk about the weekend pro wrestling? So you guys come back here exclusively on YouTube and catch us for the hour show at Rockin' Wrestling. And this is your host with the most, Nicholas Cross, signing out, Chicago, Illinois.